Hey guys, it's Tori, and today I'm going to be doing one of those 5-star audit things that a lot of people have been doing. Specifically, I'm going to focus on my tastes in classics as opposed to other types of literature. I'll probably do a separate video where I'll talk about those because I just have not very different, there's definitely some crossover, but I look for different things in more recently published works than I do in classics. So I thought it would be fun to do this. I have not really prepared all that much. I've thought a little bit about it, but it's been so long since I've done one of these videos where it's just kind of a random sit down video where I'm chatting about something. Like, all I've been doing recently has been TBR/wrap-ups and vlogs, pretty much. So I was having a really hard time, honestly, coming up with a video that I wanted to put out this week. I have a few ideas, but just narrowing down to what I was most excited to do as of right now was a bit interesting. So anyway, I am going to screen record my Goodreads list, and we'll just kind of chat down the list and some common themes, and hopefully it will be semi-interesting. Okay, I think I got it to work. If not, we'll just kind of have me talking as opposed to going through this, but we'll see how this goes. So some of the first ones showing up, which I've organized it by my rating, so that'll make it easier. We have like Rebecca. I believe down here somewhere I should have Wuthering Heights. Yes, right there I have Wuthering Heights, and then we have Middlemarch, Tenant of Wildfell Hall. So a few, oh, and then we have Always Lived in the Castle. I also missed, but it's right there. I feel like I do tend to enjoy gothic stories, but particularly ones that are focused on women, and women that maybe are not the most perfect of people, that maybe are pretty flawed themselves. I will say I do tend to like that in more modern literature as well, but in classics in particular, I do like a gothic atmosphere, particularly that's centered around a specific house, and specifically with female characters. I also really like very flawed female leads who are supposed to be flawed. Like, you're supposed to take issue with them. You're not supposed to like them. Obviously, it's a lot more irritating when it's a character that you probably are supposed to like, but they're just kind of not likable. But looking at this, Rebecca, the main character, is definitely not necessarily likable. She has her flaws and she's very obsessive and eerie. We have Always Lived in the Castle. The main character, Merricat, I believe is her name. She is a troubled soul as well. Wuthering Heights, obviously Catherine and Kathy and even Nellie in some ways. They're all very flawed. Of course, all the men are flawed as well, but in interesting ways. We have a few domestic ones in here. We have Far from the Madding Crowd. I had Middlemarch up there, North and South. I think in general I prefer classics with female leads, and that's probably just because I can connect with it a little bit better. I also find it really fascinating seeing how various authors treat the women and characterize the women, because I think that's very variable across various authors and time periods. I feel like North and South, Margaret Hale is very strong-willed and interesting to follow. Far from the Madding Crowd, Bathsheba Everdeen, of course, is just very fascinating. Moving back down to where Wuthering Heights is, Middlemarch, and the Tenant of Wildfell Hall, I believe. Yep, right there. I definitely really like classics that focus around marriage, but in a more nuanced way. Like, I don't really like classics that discuss marriage in a very hopeless way, as if like you can't ever have a really happy marriage. And I don't really like classics that just kind of make marriage out to be like it's perfect and it's good either. I love the more nuanced tellings where, like Middlemarch, you see people just trying to make things work, and sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. It has to be a partnership of trying to make it work. Obviously, Tenant of Wildfell Hall deals with marriage in a very interesting way. The House of Mirth, I feel like, has a good combination of a variety of these ideas as far as a strong, interesting, nuanced female character, as well as some level of interesting commentary on marriage, although that's a very small part of the story. Just the fact that she's a woman, an older woman, and people expect her to be married and seek marriage is kind of where it ends. But there is still a little bit of interesting commentary on there. Their Eyes Were Watching God also kind of has that. I do really tend to like stories about people just making do with what they are born into. You know, I love stories, of course, of breaking the mold old, but especially in classics, it's just very interesting to me to watch characters maybe bend the rules, even break some, but maybe not go so out there that it's just not even realistic for the society they're in, because those just end up being miserable and hopeless feeling. Whereas when there's characters who are trying to maybe push the boundaries, but are also still trying to make their life work with the circumstances they have that maybe they can't control, they kind of those characters that basically are controlling what they can and learning to cope with what they can't is just very heartening to me, where it's just more realistic. Like, people are looking at, you know, it's not all awful, but it's not all great, but you just have to make things work and do your best with what you have. I feel like The Age of Innocence has a lot of those conversations. The Hand of Ethelberta definitely has those conversations of marriage and making do with what you have. The Way We Live Now, again, I mean, this whole book is commentary on their society and trying to make it work. The Phantom of the Opera, another more gothic kind of story. I do really prefer the gothic tales I've found over any of the classic mysteries that I've read. Not that I've disliked any of them, like I really like The Woman in White, and that definitely has more gothic supernatural elements as well. The Moonstone is a little more mystery based, although there is some supernatural elements there as well, and those are two of my favorite mysteries that I've read, but usually the classic mysteries I've read don't tend to be 5 stars for me. They just are enjoyable more than anything. The Mayor of Casterbridge, I feel like this can introduce some idea of what I like in male characters. We have the Mayor of Casterbridge, we also have Wuthering Heights. I just really like, well, I like tragedies, we all know that. But in particular, I like tragedies where the characters have a lot of psychological curiosity about them. So I really like Wuthering Heights for that reason with Heathcliff. I really like the Mayor of Casterbridge because the main character in that is very psychologically interesting. Whereas on the other hand, I really hate The Great Gatsby because it's a tragedy without, I feel like, having very interesting characters, in my opinion. Having that psychological aspect to the characters that's well explored is something that really wins me over. Sense and Sensibility, I do really like female relationships in books, and so I really appreciate Sense and Sensibility for the sister relationships explored. A lot of these other books that I've already gone through also have similar feelings to them. I don't think Tess has come out, maybe it did and I just missed it, but Tess of the D'Urbervilles has some great female relationships. A lot of Hardy's works have really interesting female relationships. Bleak House is another one that has really great female relationships. It also brings up one of my favorite tropes, the fallen woman, which I know a lot of people get tired of, and sometimes there are things about it that I don't love, but I don't know. Again, it goes back to that interesting psychological character, particularly women, and making do with what you have. Of course, in a lot of classics, things end tragically for them, but I do really like seeing how they try to make things work within their sphere, and I just find it interesting seeing the different ways, different approaches that each of these women have to that same basic situation. Jane Eyre, again, we've got that gothic atmosphere. I will say I probably actually should lower this to a 4-star rating, and I might later, just because of all of the Bronte, like the big Bronte novels. This one's probably my least favorite of those. Agnes Grey, Tenant of Wadville Hall, and Wuthering Heights are my 5-star Bronte reads, so I feel like Jane Eyre probably should be more like a 4-star, but we're not going to worry about that right now. Les Miserables, again, really loving those psychologically tragic stories and the characterization that's built up where relationships and the world around them really plays into their psychology in a very realistic way. I really love Little Women, again, female friendships and relationships, and just female main characters that I really can relate to is very heavy in that. David Copperfield, I feel like I should say David Copperfield and Emma, Pride and Prejudice, a lot of those kinds of books. I really like really large casts of characters that are just very fun. I love having a large amount of characters that I just can really love to think about and analyze, and yeah, having more than just the main characters being interesting is a win for me. So like Count of Monte Cristo and Les Mis are also really good examples of that. I do tend to really like large classics as well, hence part of my love for 19th century literature is they tend to have longer books that have a lot lot more buildup of characterization and psychology and relationships, and I just love that exploration. The Lottery, I feel like this is one that it just excites me as far as I really like dramatic moments in stories. I like the buildup and just having things come together all of a sudden in a way that shocks you. This is definitely not just for classics, but I do like it in classics when dramatic things happen at the end, hence why I love Hardy so much, hence why some of my favorite things in Dickens are some of the really dramatic and unexpected scenes, and also hence why I like tragedies, because I just like really dramatic moments. The Yellow Wallpaper, a great example of my love of female main characters, psychology explored within the characters themselves and their reactions to things. Yeah, I really love that. I think that's pretty much it. There's nothing else in detail that I really have noticed I loved within classics. I do like a domestic story, but those tend to be more likely 4 stars unless they have some of those things I've already discussed. I do think also that the older I get, the more certain types of writing styles stand out to me. I would say writing styles that include poetic kind of imagery and interesting thoughts about human psychology and spirituality, I think really draw me in, as long as they don't overdo it. Like, I do have limits on those things. If they're going off way too philosophical, it will draw me out of the story. Interestingly enough, I feel like George Eliot sometimes does that, but all of the books I've read by her I've given 5 stars. So she does enough right that those little moments where I'm like, okay, we're getting a little on the philosophical side, too much for my style, just aren't big enough to be enough of a problem, because her other things of tragedy and exploring people psychologically and their relationships and having really interesting nuanced female characters just overcomes all of my other issues. So anyway, that is all I have for today. Let me know down below if you know of any classics that maybe you didn't see on my list. I didn't show everything on my list, so keep that in mind. But if you didn't see it, let me know if there's some you think I would really like based on what I've talked about. I do have a lot of physical TBR books that are classics that are ones that I think will probably bring me a lot of these tropes and aspects to the story that I really love. So I'm excited to continue to explore classics and see what I'm able to discover about my tastes and how my tastes shift over time. I would love to do one of these in a few years and see if my tastes have changed at all or if it's pretty much the same. So anyway, that is that. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!